Well, Ken Flo got the collared shirt memo for this episode. Sunday, February 5th, 2023, episode 386 of the Anik and Florian podcast. I can honestly say if this is episode 386, and it is, I just said it was, I don't think I've ever worn a collar on this podcast, not one time.
I think you're right. I don't remember it.
Maybe for some award show we got dressed up, but I don't even think that. Right? I don't even think fucking that. We did one episode in our Fox studios when we had a licensing deal with Fox, and yes. I might have thrown on a collar for that. But as my daughters can attest, we're essentially wearing pajamas out here in South Florida. Speaking of which, not that we willed it to happen, once I saw some of these Floridian-based fighters on the fight card like Santiago Ponzinibbio, I started to think this shit might happen. So UFC 287, April 8th. I already booked a room for my daughter and my wife at the W Hotel Miami, 1.3 miles from Miami-Dade Arena. It needs naming right now, but it's the home of the Miami Heat. And for the first time in 20 years, Ken Flo, the UFC is headed to not Hollywood, Florida, not Fort Lauderdale, with respect, not Orlando, not Jacksonville, not fucking Tampa. 305 Miami, Florida, 50 minutes from my front door. Let's fucking go.
Super cool, man. What a card. What a card. And I know for you, that's got to be special. Just a short drive away. And, man, tremendous. You got Jorge Masvidal on there. He's going to be fighting in Miami. That alone is going to be huge for him. And, of course, that city, they'll be there to show up and sell out very quickly, I'm sure.
So I got a lot of text messages after this was announced. And I'm honestly, sometimes I'll get a text message from somebody who might be like number 300 on my list for potential tickets, looking for tickets, right? It's like, man, there are like 25 family members that aren't getting tickets, never mind people that are, right. On a tertiary list. It's a very exciting thing though, right? Because even though the UFC has done fight nights in Hollywood, I think you and I called Thiago Santos knocking Steve Bossy's head into next week in Hollywood, Florida, if I'm not mistaken, Seminole Hard Rock. And we mentioned Jacksonville obviously has been omnipresent on the UFC schedule, Tampa, Orlando, but not since UFC 42 Sudden Impact, April 25, 2003. There's the Wikipedia page to prove it. Has the UFC been to Miami, Florida that night, Ken Flo? Welterweight title fight, your old friend Sean Shirk and Matt Hughes. 20 years, man, 20 fucking years.
It's crazy.
You were, I guess you were in your mid-20s. And yes. I guess just starting to probably embark on your UFC or your MMA journey. It says here, Joe Rogan provided the lead commentary for this event and was joined by color commentator Phil Baroni with further analysis by Eddie Bravo. Very cool. Very excited. I'm going to try to buy a bunch of tickets. And my daughter Riley, who's 11, will be in the building for the first time at a UFC pay-per-view, which is very exciting. So, by the way, I have a mug here. Of decaffeinated green tea. And it says on it, you can ignore the queen, but she's still the queen, right? Now, I got this mug for my wife. It's a nice mug. Like if somebody gets me a mug that says you can ignore the king, he's still the king, I'd be like, no, you can't fucking ignore the king. I don't care about any title or being the king. And this mug that I purchased essentially gives me the right to ignore the queen, which is my wife. So you can ignore the queen, but she's still the queen. All right, well, I'm fucking ignoring. You can be the fucking queen. You can be the fucking princess. I don't care what you are. All right. We have a lot of things to get to, but I thought Miami should lead the dance, even though the biggest superstar in mixed martial arts history is back. We all knew he'd be back. Or I shouldn't say that, but most of us, certainly any of us who know what makes this man tick, knew that Conor McGregor was going to be back in a competitive setting. And there's really only one setting for him, and that's the UFC. And it's going to be Michael Chandler at 170 pounds, and it's going to come on the tail end of a stint on The Ultimate Fighter between these two gentlemen. Your thoughts on all of that?
I think this is the right move for a couple different reasons. I think it's the right move for the UFC. You have a guy in Conor McGregor who has been the biggest name, one of the biggest names in sports, let alone the UFC and mixed martial arts. And he's taken on one of the most exciting fighters in mixed martial arts in Chandler. I think it's a good fight. I think it's going to be an exciting fight. Both those guys have a shot. I'm looking forward to seeing how Conor McGregor comes back from this. On a technical level, I think it's a good fight for him in this first comeback after that broken leg. Chandler, of course, is going to oblige and try to stand and trade to try to entertain the fans. I would think. So I don't know. I think it's going to be an exciting fight. and a huge one. And it's a good way to kind of build it up with the Ultimate Fighter.
All right, so Conor McGregor will be competing at 170 pounds. And I hate to get ahead of ourselves in some respects, right? Because they are going to coach on the Ultimate Fighter. And I do think it's a setting in which both men obviously can shine. And we'll see, where Conor McGregor is at in terms of his overall commitment, right? Because I have said he is a master orator, right? Puts me to shame when it comes to like natural articulation skills. So if Conor McGregor is willing to give people things on television alongside Michael Chandler, it could be absolutely electric, right? But ultimately for Conor McGregor, he's 7-0 in the UFC at 145 pounds, 1-3 in the UFC at 155 pounds, 2-1 at welterweight. So there's some unknowns with Michael Chandler competing at welterweight. How do you handicap this fight? I'll get you the betting line in a minute. My twin brother's like ripping on you and me, by the way, just because we can't like predict the betting line. It's like, okay, buddy, he's like, dude, you guys think that fucking Gilbert Burns would be minus 190 against Jorge Masvidal? He's like minus 435, properly priced. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But what do you think about Conor McGregor and this fight at welterweight, even though seemingly it could still be a fight that is relevant when it comes to the lightweight championship picture?
Conor McGregor could fight at any weight at this standpoint. The name is going to bring in fans to watch no matter what. And at 170 pounds, I don't think it's going to be a big deal for either Chandler or Conor McGregor. They're both around the same size. Chandler's going to be a little shorter, a little bulkier. And for Conor McGregor, I think that he's at the stage of his career where, unless it's for a belt or leading to a belt, I don't see him wanting to cut that weight at this standpoint. So I don't know. I think this may favor Conor in some ways, but Chandler's not going to have a problem in the power and strength department fighting at 170 pounds against a true 155er in Conor McGregor.
I wonder the extent to which Chandler wants to wrestle. I mean, perhaps there's some backdoor agreement that he can't wrestle and he just has to strike. No, but I think largely it'll be a striking fight, and I do think one of these men is getting knocked out. So, Kenny, care to venture a guess as to what the betting line might be for these two individuals? And you're right, as I let you marinate on it, I want to give you 20 seconds to think about who might be favored and where the price might be. But, it's not like this easy cut for Michael Chandler down to 55 or 56, right? Like if this was you at this stage of your career, you're Michael Chandler. Ken Flo would love to have this fight at 171 pounds. So to that end, Ken Flo, who's the favorite? What do you think is the betting line? Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler at a date to be determined.
Yeah, agreed. I think that there's going to be a lot of question marks around Conor McGregor's return, that leg, and how that holds up. Chandler has been the more active guy. So I would assume that Chandler is going to be the favorite here in and around, 2-1?
So, Cody, unless I am mistaken, it is minus 110 on both sides. I looked it up on bestfightodds.com. Yep, there it is from DraftKings Sportsbook. Minus 110 on both sides. Now, getting predictive when it comes to forecasting betting lines. Like, Kenny, if you saw what I predicted for some of these lines, like for UFC 284 before I write them down, god awful, right? So it's not always the most exact science. Mm-hmm. Take Masvidal and Burns, for example. Now, I understand that Gilbert Burns is going to be a favorite, and in my mind, prohibitively so. But minus 500 to me is still a huge number, and that is not me denigrating Gilbert Burns. And now that fight is in Miami, I don't think it hurts either guy. It's a home game for Gilbert Burns as well. But the king of the 305 is Jorge Gamebred Masvidal, and right now he's north of plus 400. To me, that's a huge number. All right.